Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 5th of September 2024, at least in my normal stream of videos. There is a breaking news kind of explainer video, pretty large one, on the scandal that's broken with regard to Russian disinformation finding its way into the US. Now, there is an awful lot of content, both in this video and all day. Sorry, today's one of those days where there is just a ton of stuff happening. This military aid video has loads on where there hasn't been massive amounts for some time. It's just a big old day of information. I'm sorry if you want me to have shorter videos. Please watch me at 1.5, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75 times the speed. You can go to the cog of the video and you can speed me up. I find that I can't listen to anything these days at less than sort of 1.75. I have to take my information in much quicker than people naturally speak. So anyway, it's up to you, but there is that option for you if you are short on time. Right, we're going to start with a section on US comments and claims and some analysis of US aid and also restrictions on weapons being used by the Ukrainians. Right, we have a quote from John Kirby, National Security Advisor. My opinion of John Kirby, I like John Kirby. I think he's feeling constrained by the Biden administration official line on the usage of these weapons and the restrictions. But anyway, that's just pure speculation. Quote, "We are working to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. The position remains unwavering regarding strikes deep into the Russian territory." Unwavering is an odd word, as mentioned here by Ukraine Battlemat. Unwavering, they're saying that it's like a good thing. You usually say we're unwavering in our support of, but to say we're unwavering in our declaration that Ukrainians can't use weaponry into deep into Russian territory is kind of an odd choice of word. Anyway, it's not a good thing. So it is still the case that Russia is safe. The best air defense is the US restrictions on Ukrainian usage of Western weaponry deep into Russia. It's really, really frustrating that is still the case. Right, there has also been some other claims from that came out of this talk that John Kirby gave. So he said that the White House briefing, 90% of Russian aircraft are over 300 kilometers away from Ukraine. So allowing Ukraine to hit Russian territory with ATACMS wouldn't help prevent attacks on Ukraine. So that's part of we're unwavering, and actually it wouldn't be useful for Ukraine to do it because they've already moved 90% of their aircraft. Well, they've moved it because you didn't allow them to fire into Russia. So there is that. But there's also this idea that, hang on, there's still 10% left and other things. So anyway, feels like bad faith at this point, says Edward Hunter Christie. Assuming that the 10-90 ratio is even correct, what's the reason for preventing the destruction of the 10% of Russian aircraft? None. Thought so. If the White House hadn't wasted time, I presume that the 10% would be more than 10% would be in the 300-kilometer range. If the White House had more resolve, Ukraine would already be going beyond 300 kilometers with Western weapons. As for the 300-kilometer range of the ATACMS, there's still plenty of relevant targets for the land war. And that's a really good point. John Ridge says, as it happens, there are other things in Russia besides airfields that can be attacked with ATACMS or JASMs. So it's deeply, deeply frustrating that the US administration have kept this restriction on the use of US and indeed allied weaponry deep into Russia. It's really, really frustrating. There are more targets than just aircraft, and those 10% of aircraft that Ukraine is still left would be pretty substantial if the Russians lost those. According to the study award, there are over 225 Russian military objects in range of Ukrainian ATACMS, such as supply depots, logistics nodes, and 16 military air bases. There are plenty of worthwhile targets for Ukraine. Change the policy, says Razom for Ukraine. Absolutely in agreement with those positions. Now, John Kirby also added that the US intends to send a new batch of military aid to Ukraine in the coming weeks. Now, fingers crossed that will be substantial. For example, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called for the immediate delivery of ATACMS to Ukraine. There are some claims that the Ukrainians haven't used ATACMS for a long time. And it could be that they've actually run out of them, or they're just keeping them back just in case. He also urged that Boris Johnson urged the removal of restrictions on the range and suggested allowing Ukraine to target and destroy the Kerch Bridge, which then makes one wonder whether the Kerch Bridge is not being attacked because of pressure from. And there were previously some rumours that Olaf Scholz and others have put pressure on the Ukrainians not to hit Kerch Bridge. I don't think they have the weaponry to take out the Kerch Bridge, and it's very well defended by air defence at the moment. But here we've got Boris Johnson saying they should be allowed to strike the Kerch Bridge. The suggestion is that there are others that are not allowing it. Okay, so Ukraine battle map says $250 million every month now. The US aid is at its lowest it's ever been in the war, other than when Congress did not approve funding. Now Biden has funding for a year and is sending it like it's for 3 years. At this level of aid, Ukraine will lose. No wonder they are losing so much land, he says. The last time US sent a PDA package to a Presidential Drawdown Authority, when they send stuff from US stocks, it's the most immediate way of getting equipment. They don't have to get it made. They don't have to put orders in with manufacturers. The last time they sent a PDA worth $250 million was over 3 months ago. All since then were $200 million or less. Compare that with 2022 and 2023, when PDA packages were almost always over 400 million, occasionally over 1 billion, and 5.35 billion in 2 weeks at one point. So that is an interesting observation. There are some saying that the Biden administration don't want to do anything big on Ukraine before the elections because it might upset the apple cart with regard to the elections as soon as November the 5th comes along. If the Harris, or maybe even if they don't, like either way, they will then send a load after November the 5th. They just don't want it to muddy the waters with regard to public opinion and spending. So if suddenly like $1 billion worth of kit goes to Ukraine, what does that look like to the electorate? It looks like that's $1 billion should be going to education or something like that. And then you might say, have a go at the Biden administration and Harris by extension for not spending money, even though it's completely different, buckets of cash that is spent in completely different, is not fair to do that. But for the average low information voter, they will see a lot of kit going to Ukraine and put with the press reporting the book value of that stuff, even though it's effectively free stuff going to Ukraine. It's been bought and paid for. Sending 100 Bradleys that are sitting out in the desert is only going to cost you transport and maybe refurbishment costs as well. But it's been bought and paid for, and you're getting a newer stuff that's better than that. So it's effectively $0 worth, but then it'll have a book value of being worth for resale. I don't know. Let's make something up of like the $300 million. You're like, oh right, we just given $300 million to Ukraine. Well, what about hospitals? What about this? So. This, you can understand that the optics are not great at the moment for US giving massive packages to Ukraine. So that might be why you're seeing smaller ones being given, hopefully more frequently. Malcontent News says some things here. Now, you can probably disagree with some of this. Some people have disagreed. I don't know the rules on the Presidential Drawdown Authority expiration. I don't know if this is true. Some people have called this into question. Nonetheless, he says, or they say, $6.8 billion in Presidential Drawdown Authority will expire on September the 30th if it's not allocated or administratively reserved. Romania doesn't have its promised Patriot battery. No large caliber ammunition shipments to Ukraine since June. No ATACMS strikes in a month. Romania and Poland blocked from defending their own airspace. So the argument here is it's the US that's blocking Poland and Romania for doing the shooting down of the Russian Shahed drones, even though Belarus has done that last night. Anyway, the UK and France blocked from sovereign decisions on Storm Shadow and Scalp EG. So that is the idea. The Americans are stopping the UK and French from, those UK and French missiles from being used deep into Russia. A promise by the US Air Force to provide the sustainment of F-16s have been broken, and that's true, actually. There have been previous declarations that the US were going to sustain the maintenance of the F-16s that were going to be used in Ukraine, and they've since come out in the last few weeks and said the sustainment of that, the sustainment program, will be provided by the Europeans. Only 6 pilots have been trained is a claim here. I can't speak to that. No financial year 2025 budget request for Ukraine. No movement by the G7 on the $50 billion in Ukraine to Ukraine from Russian funds. Unenforced sanctions supporting Russian missiles and bombs striking Ukraine, Syria and Sudan. The State Department hopes that to one day normalise relations with Putin. Again, some of these are claims that are not, so that one has been denied, that one. The world is watching as Iran and North Korea arm Russia and attacks are launched from Belarus with impunity. NATO alliance airspace repeatedly violated with impunity. Factories and commerce centres in Europe burned. Railroad infrastructure sabotaged. People assassinated. Internet communications infrastructure destroyed. This is all true. These are things that have happened. It's painting a very negative signal. GPS signals jammed across multiple countries and parts of the Black Sea. True. Russian-backed Polish protests crippled Ukrainian commerce in 2023 and into 2024. Russian weaponized immigration supported by Cuba and Nicaragua. The actions of Washington have done more to cause nuclear proliferation than every nuclear threat from Russia combined. Russia restarted its chemical weapons program, according to the State Department memo on June the 7th. It will take a generation to fix US reputation when Washington says as long as it takes. And we defeat Russia now in Kiev or in 5 years in Warsaw or Berlin against millions of forcibly mobilized Ukrainians living under occupation filled with a terrible resolve. So that's all the arguments that the US, this is a very anti-US screed here, saying that actually what they're not doing at the moment is leading to X, Y, and Z, and actually if we were stronger and the Americans were stronger against Ukraine right now, then you won't be having to pick up the pieces as the Russians move on in 5 years' time, so on and so forth. Okay, treat some of those claims with a large dose of salt. Now, the good news for where the US is concerned, the question is, what's going to happen after the election? So after the election, if Trump gets in, is it going to be a bit of a disaster for Ukraine? The indications are looking like yes, but what happens if Harris gets in? And at the moment, there is a slight lack of clarity with whether Harris will just be more of the same, but more of the same from the Biden administration, I don't think is good enough. I mean, it's better than the alternative of Trump, is my opinion, but it is far from great. I think the anti-escalation ideology is permeating too strongly in the Biden administration. So this is really good. Now, who is this? This is Mark Kelly, senator from Arizona, who was one of the top picks for the vice president for Kamala Harris. In the end, I think it rightfully went to Tim Walz for a bunch of electoral reasons. But Mark Kelly might feature strongly. He might feature in a cabinet, might feature in terms of creating a Ukraine policy. He is a former Navy captain, a pilot. He's helped, I think, train Ukrainian pilots. He's a former astronaut, etc., etc. So he's very strong on defense and whatnot. Listen to this.
Are you comfortable with U.S. weapons being used on Russian soil?
Well, Margaret, yes. I am at this point.
He is comfortable.
The Ukrainians were illegally attacked by Vladimir Putin. He is intentionally killing women, children, old people. It was an illegal invasion. This incursion, let's characterize it that way for now. I don't think the Ukrainians want to intentionally hold Russian territory for a long period of time, but this really set Putin back on his heels. He has always tried to characterize himself as somebody that is going to protect Russia. I think his citizens are seeing the results of what he has done in Ukraine, that now they are somewhat at risk.
Do you think
130,000 Russians have had to leave their homes? And at this point in this conflict, I think the Ukrainians did something unpredictable that could really change the tide of how this conflict's going to play out.
So it's really interesting that he's already said at the beginning of that he's happy with Ukraine using Western weapons inside Russia, which is, as Doug Klain says, a notable shift from him in support of lifting US weapons restrictions, because 3 weeks ago on Face the Nation, he was pushed on this and wasn't ready to call on the White House to let Ukraine strike back. So that is a personal change from him. and I think gives you an indication of possibly where Kamala Harris's administration might go if she was voted in.
Of key former officials, including the former Supreme Allied Commander, General Breedlove, wrote a letter to President Biden last week calling on him to lift restrictions on the U.S. weapons provided to Ukraine to allow them to strike legitimate military targets in Russia. Would you echo their calls?
Well, Margaret, those restrictions, some of them have already been lifted. And since the invasion now over 2 years ago, we have, periodically, as we should, reevaluate, how we're going to conduct ourselves with regards to the Ukrainians' use of the security assistance that we provide them. And I think it's appropriate to continue to look at what their needs are. How can we make adjustments? What new weapon systems are we going to provide to them? They just recently got F-16s. My hope is that over time here, the Ukrainians learn how to better deploy that weapon system, and we're going to see some positive effects from F-16s on the battlefield. The same is true for ATACMS and HIMARS and these other weapons. So, periodically reevaluating what we allow them to use is the appropriate thing to do.
So it is slightly an improved position from previously, saying we should reevaluate. At the beginning, he's okay with their use into Russia, but he's not saying let's lift restrictions 100%, but we should reevaluate. I think it's about inference there, and using some inference, I think we can probably conclude that, or we conclude that he probably is in support of a changing of those restrictions there. So that could be good news from a kind of Harris administration point of view. Now let's go on to other aid topics. Zelensky will attend the Ramstein meeting in Germany tomorrow, according to Der Spiegel. He plans to appeal to Western partners for continued weapons supplies. So this is an in-person defense contact group meeting, 50 allies of Ukraine, talking about what stuff can go, how Ukraine can be supported by those allies. And he's going to turn up in person. That's really good news, to appeal for those Western partners to provide continued weapons supplies, including long-range missiles and additional air defense systems. So we'll see what comes out of that. Ukraine Defense Minister Rustem Umerov has called on allies to accelerate the delivery of weapons during his visit to the UK over the last couple of days. His statements came after a Russian attack in Lviv that killed 7 people. So the UK, as with many countries, has struggled to get their pledged equipment to Ukraine in a timely fashion. And we all need to be much better, much quicker at changing pledges to reality. Now, Alexander Kamyshin, the now former, strategic industries minister, has resigned. He appears to be taking up a position as an advisor to Zelensky in that role, as in strategic industries advisor, but I don't know for sure. Now he's got a thread here, and it's worth just getting a sense of what has been achieved in Ukraine, actually. So I'm going to read this fairly hefty thread. Right, 534 days ago, I was appointed as the minister. My task was clear: to restart the ministry's operations according to wartime realities. Today, I'm stepping down. In 2023, production tripled, and by September 2024, it doubled again. Drones, ammunition, armored vehicles, the missile program, current capabilities allowed to scale production rapidly, provided there are procurement contracts. We've launched serial production of the full range of mortar and artillery rounds. That's inside Ukraine. We manufacture more self-propelled artillery systems than any other country of a free world. That's incredible. So that'd be Bogdana self-propelled guns, I would have thought. We've made significant progress in the missile program. That'll be the Neptune missile and other maybe missile drones. Ukrainian long-range drones strike the enemy deep behind their lines daily. Over 1 million FPV drones are already contracted with the capability to produce over 3 million. So he's long talked about how actually there's a $10 billion shortfall. They could produce way more than they presently do. They just need the money. Last year, the main challenge was production capabilities. Today, it's funding of procurement. That's why we turn to partner governments with the Zabroyari initiative, initiative, securing an additional $670 million for purchasing Ukrainian weapons. The international track has been one of the most crucial, partnering with companies like Rheinmetall and Northrop Grumman, transferring licenses for ammunition and rifle production and joint technological solutions. We launched the first International Defence Forum, DFNC1, and the Alliance Defence Industries with 116 companies from 24 countries. So that's bringing together the industrial military complex from all these countries to work together with Ukraine to either build in Ukraine or work with Ukraine closely. Transforming Geopol, so that's a Ukrainian defense manufacturer, is another major achievement. In fact, it's a guy who's CEO of that who's now taking over as Strategic Industries Minister. The company was corporatized, got the best supervisory board, began to use strong anti-corruption practices. It ranked 49th in the top 100 defense companies in 2024. A big part of the success is due to Herman Smetanin. He's the guy who's now going to be the minister. Reviving the honour and dignity of the armourer profession became a personal mission. That's why we started collaborating with top polytechnics, initiated the Armourers Day introduced by the president, and opened a veteran reintegration centre at Geopol. So that's great to get veterans, maybe injured people who are unable to go back to the front line to work in the defence industry. Over the past 1.5 years, defence workers received 772 state awards, including major ones from the president. Previously, when professions like engineers or armourer were barely considered by students, this was unimaginable. For me, a sign of the change is that the defence sector is now attractive to young people. There are more labs and workshops in polytechnics, and more startups are joining Brave One. In 2024, 978 students interned in Geopol, 63 of whom stayed for permanent jobs. We're experiencing a real boom in defence technology. Over 200 companies are working on robotic systems, UAVs, marine drones. We launched the Iron Polygon with Defence Ukraine, so that is the MOD and the General Staff, giving developers the chance to test their products with military feedback early on. I am grateful for the support of my president and his team, the Prime Minister, colleagues from the government and Parliament, industry representatives, international partners, and of course my own Iron team. None of this would have been possible without you. For me, it's time for new challenges. I will remain part of the team and continue doing everything possible to bring our victory closer. I will keep building the arsenal of the free world. So this looks like one of those moves that isn't kind of getting sacked or getting moved aside because you're not very good or whatever. This is someone who's been amazing, done really well, moving aside for whatever reasons. Maybe he's becoming an even more integral part of the presidential team. But he's done a particularly good job in his role. So moving on, Ukraine and Ireland have signed a bilateral security agreement. This year, Ireland will provide Ukraine with an additional $128 million for non-lethal military support. So that's obviously super important given that they are a neutral country, so they're probably unlikely to give any weapons, but things like helmets and body armor I would have thought, and at least $40 million for humanitarian aid. Ireland will also supply demining systems, equipment for defusing explosives, and participate in the demining coalition, including training Ukrainian soldiers. Excellent. The UK signed a £300 million pound, and I talked about this yesterday, but I thought I'd bring this up again because A, it's just massive, and B, we heard that Zelensky mentioned that the ratio of artillery ammunition used in Pokrovsk has gone from 1 to 12 to 1 to 3. That's massive. So Ukraine are clearly getting a lot more artillery ammunition than they previously were, especially during that 7-month impasse in Congress. So the UK signed a £300 million contract under which it is expected to deliver thousands of 152mm, so Soviet-era artillery shells for Ukraine's Soviet-era guns before the end of the year, according to the British MOD on Tuesday. Ukraine ordered the first 10,000 drones with artificial intelligence through Prozoro, according to the Minister of Digital Transformation, Fedorov. Such drones will become cheaper in the future due to the competition of state-ordered manufacturers. Also, drones with AI will help bypass enemy electronic warfare systems, is the hope there. So really good news there, potentially. Now, Kiev-based firm Ukrainian Armor presented its new Protector uncrewed ground vehicle. Interesting. The logistics drone can also be used for reconnaissance, launching UAVs, and be equipped with armaments. So this is a logistics drone, or it can be a drone that has all those armaments as well. ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, an auto cannon turret, etc., etc. Wow. So that is, again, more adaptation and an evolution of uncrewed vehicles there. Now, the Jura armored vehicle for Army tactical missions, this is, I guess, a light vehicle, rather a bit of a step up from a golf buggy, but it's not exactly a mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle. The Jura armoured vehicle for Army tactical missions, developed by Praktika, there's a Ukrainian company, obviously, on a Land Cruiser 70 chassis. When I was backpacking around Australia in 1996, I hooked up with two Dutch girls and an English guy, older English guy, who had just got hold of a 1976 Toyota Land Cruiser, had been adapted with LPG and fuel and petrol, and we went from Alice Springs to Perth and then Perth to Darwin cross country. It's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. We ran out of fuel at one point and we were coasting up and down. We just had enough and we just got to this ranch that luckily had some fuel. That was amazing. I was standing on the back, and every time we went downhill, we gathered momentum. It was this undulating road, and then on the uphill bit, I jumped off the back, and me and this other guy, we picked up another English backpacker then, and we were pushing the back, and then it was amazing. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So there you go. Built on a Toyota Land Cruiser 70 chassis, it features level 4 armour and a 200 horsepower diesel engine. Designed for stealth, it's ideal for low-risk operations by police and special forces. Good stuff. Interesting. Okay, now here we have component production and drone assembly and flight testing for the Wild Hornets. I do want to get hold of the Wild Hornets guy. I've got his number, but he hasn't replied. But anyway, this is a charity, an organisation, non-profit organisation that is creating an incredible array of drones for the Ukrainian army, including the Queen Hornet, which is a much bigger one that can drop other drones or do all sorts of stuff. Anyway, I think it might be the Hornet drone, Wild Hornet drones that have been carrying those TM62 anti-tank mines that you've seen. Here, this just shows the importance of 3D printing. 3D printing appears to be like the future so much at the moment. You can produce all this stuff relatively easily, and then it's just a case of assembly, and Bob's your uncle. Robert's your mother's brother. You are up and running with a drone. Whack on some explosives that you just hanging around in the fridge, and then throw those into the front line. It's as easy as that. It's really good. No, so Wild Hornet's doing a fabulous job there of creating, building, testing, and sending this equipment to the front line, and then getting feedback, and then that feeds into your design. And so you have this great feedback loop that is allowing the Ukrainian producers of drones to be really reactive and produce stuff that is useful for the front line on a consistent basis. Now, the city of Nancy, French city, will supply 2 generators for the schools in Vinnytsia. I know this is only a small, whatever, but actually what you have going on all the time, and there's a long thread here by French aid to Ukraine, as part of the cooperation between the towns of Vinnytsia and the twins town in France, Nancy. They are doing X, Y, and Z, and the mayors get together. This is happening with a number of places. We've got the Danish down in Mykolaiv. We've got here with Vinnytsia and Nancy and other places. There are consistent assistance packages coming, kind of not at a state level, but underneath that at a city level that is helping Ukraine, and it's really worth shouting about that, when it does happen. So well done to Nancy there. Germany orders 17 IRIS-T air defense systems for Ukraine, according to Scholz. Berlin ordered an additional 17 IRIS-T air defense systems for Ukraine, according to the Chancellor yesterday. Now, there's been a bit of confusion here. Some saying that, there are new IRIS-Ts being ordered and delivered for Ukraine. German aid to Ukraine says, right, given yesterday's false reports by Reuters regarding IRIS-T SLM, that's a medium-range version of the air defense system, and the cruel Russian attacks on the Ukrainian civilians, I decided to write a more detailed tweet about the German donations of IRIS-T SLM and SLS, the short-range one as well, including a timeline of the deliveries. TLDR at the end. So we're going to go to the TLDR because that's a big, long piece, but thank you, German aid, to doing the work you do. What is being delivered? IRIS-T SLM, medium-range fire units, and IRIS-T SLS launchers How much was pledged? A total of 12 IRIS-T SLM fire units and 24 IRIS-T SLS launchers were pledged to be delivered. What has already been delivered: 4 IRIS-T SLM fire units and medium-range fire units and 6 IRIS-T SLS launchers. So it looks like the launchers are short range, so this is mainly short-range provision. What will be delivered by the end of 2024? 2 more IRIS-T SLM fire units and 4 more IRIS-T SLS launchers. What deliveries are planned for 2025? 3 IRIS-T SLM fire units and 6 IRIS-T SLS launchers. What can we expect in 2026? In 2 years' time, the remaining 3 SLM fire units and 8 SLS launchers will be delivered. So there you go. A lot of stuff that Germany is pledging and providing, and a timeline for them. Thank you very much, German aid to Ukraine. They look a little bit like that. And that. Maybe that. And arguably that. Okay. Now, German aid to Ukraine has another big old tweet here on explaining what's going on with SPAGs. So self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, the Gepard. So as I've just seen the tweet from the German MOD announcing the delivery of further Gepard SPAGs to Ukraine this year, a few words and information on this. So let's see, the SPAG looks like that, in case you have forgotten. Okay, so a few words on this. Let's go back though. Typical. It's always going to happen, isn't it? Okay, so officially 10 are to be delivered until the end of 2024, with a further 5 to follow in 2025. This is a German share of up to 60 Cheetah. These are slightly upgraded Dutch versions of the SPAG, of the Gepard. Gepard means cheetah, but when it's written as cheetah, they are those ones that were originally, I think, in Jordan. Yeah, in Jordan, bought back from Jordan in cooperation with the US. The Cheetah SPAG is the Dutch version of the Gepard SPAG, which differs from the German version, for example, by having a different radar, so it's got a slightly better radar, among other differences. According to an announcement by the German MOD in June 2023, these were actually supposed to be delivered at the end of 2023. Officially, at least the majority will now be delivered by the end of 2024, with a 1-year delay. What's interesting, however, is that the Cheetah SPAGs arrived in Ukraine a long time ago, and neither the US nor Germany took responsibility for the delivery. Although these are the two countries that bought and wanted to deliver these vehicles. While I even found a video showing Ukrainian soldiers with a Cheetah SPAG during last winter, the Ukrainians, more precisely the Air Command West, confirmed in June 2024, almost exactly 3 months ago, that the Cheetah SPAGs were in service. Despite this, Germany and the US are remaining silent and have not officially confirmed the deliveries. And it might be why you're getting such a good interception rate on these Shahed drones at the moment, because they just have a lot more of these SPAGs, like the Gepards and the Cheetah, than initially thought. While it may be the case that the delivered vehicles originate purely from the US share, I can neither confirm nor refute this, so I wanted to add it as extra context. According to the latest and official information, Germany has so far delivered 52 Gepards to Ukraine, possibly also an unknown number of Cheetahs. The final number of vehicles delivered to Ukraine will therefore be 67 Gepard or Cheetahs by 2025 at the latest. What shouldn't get forgotten here is that Rheinmetall set up an entirely new production line for Gepard Cheetah ammunition after being contracted by the German government. This ensures a mid-term supply of ammunition for this vital air defence asset, as ammunition had previously become increasingly scarce, as there were no longer any production lines and stocks had to be brought together from everywhere. Some deliveries to Ukraine were even blocked, for looking at you there, Switzerland. A total of 300,000 rounds of ammunition, consisting of 150,000 rounds of APDST and 150,000 rounds of HEIT ammunition, are to be delivered for a 3-digit million euro sum paid by Germany. Again, Germany coming up with the goods here. Almost 100,000 rounds of APDST from this order have so far been delivered to Ukraine. Nevertheless, Rheinmetall is slightly behind schedule. The 150,000 APDST rounds should actually have been fulfilled or delivered in full by summer. Production was then scheduled to be switched to the other version, the HEIT ammunition, and the delivery of new ammunition should have begun afterwards. However, since the first produced ammunition hasn't been delivered in full by now, at least according to publicly available data, the production shift hasn't been done by now, and I would assume that the whole timeline delays by up to half a year. Nevertheless, Ukraine's ammunition supply should still be secured by 2026 thanks to regular deliveries. Right, and it appears that ammunition that they are providing, Rheinmetall are now using manufacturing for these Gepards is better than the original ammunition as well. That's worth noting. Now, Germany is punishing the Swiss defense industry for blocking deliveries of Swiss-made arms to Ukraine, again says German aid to Ukraine. German authorities have informed the Swiss Federal Office for Defense Procurement in a letter that the German Bundeswehr would refrain from procuring certain Swiss armaments in future. For example, Switzerland prevented the delivery of 12,000 rounds of ammunition for the Gepard's Spags, as we've just been talking about, which are a critical air defense asset in Ukraine. I don't know if this is some kind of retributive vengeance on Switzerland, but I talked a long time ago when Switzerland were putting up these blocks that the Swiss arms export industry will be hit because people will not buy from them because you won't be able to shift that stuff on after you need them to a load of different places if Switzerland says you can't. And Switzerland's neutrality puts added restrictions on buying equipment from Switzerland, so you might as well buy it from somewhere else. So I don't know what's going on here, but yeah, the Swiss industry is suffering, it looks like. Now, we've heard that the Swiss government is looking into even, stepping away from their centuries-old neutrality. So we'll see if that actually happens. Now, quote, as long as Scholz is empowered, Taurus missiles, so their version of the Scalp or the Storm Shadow cruise missile, the supposedly better version, the Taurus missiles won't be coming as long as Scholz is in power. As the ex-member of the German Council on Foreign Relations, Thales, Benjamin Thales, makes it clear to the European Parliament the rise of the AfD isn't Ukraine's top problem after the local elections. So the idea is that actually Scholz is being a bit of an issue. Having said that, we've just heard how much Germany is doing outside of the Taurus. So, we do need to understand Germany's incredible support of Ukraine, all things considered. Quote, Minister of Defense Bratislav Gasic has denied the false information published by some domestic and regional media that the contract to purchase 12 new Rafale planes from Dassault Aviation allegedly contains a clause stipulating that Serbian MiG-29 jets should be transferred to France and subsequently delivered to Ukraine. Serbians are flatly denying this. This has been kind of sort of debunked by many people, saying there was a rumor that the 12 Dassault Rafale jets that Serbia are ordering off France is going to come in a contract that involves Serbian MiGs going to France and then going to Ukraine. Of course, French would have no way of refurbishing Serbian MiGs. They don't have that capability, I don't think. So they also the Serbians don't have that many operational MiGs that were rumoured in this. So anyway, the Serbians have denied that that's actually going to be happening at all, and I would assume that it probably isn't. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that the country is ready to help build Lviv after the Russian missile strike. So this is Poland coming to Lviv's aid. It's a lot closer to Poland than anywhere else, really. It's on the western side of Ukraine, near to the Polish border. A day of mourning has been declared in Lviv. That's taking place today. So Donald Tusk saying the right things there. Poland's defence spending in 2025 is slated to capture a record 4.7% share of the country's GDP. Wow. So the US is long bemoaned the idea that other nations, like Trump is big on this, other nations don't pay enough as a percentage of their GDP on defence. 2% benchmark was agreed in 2014, or was put forward in 2014. More countries are doing it now than previously, but still a number aren't. And now Trump has been talking about moving that up to 3%. Well, actually, Poland is at 4.7%, or it's on track for being 4.7% in 2025. That's absolutely massive. Poland and Lithuania are ready to train Ukrainian soldiers on a joint platform, according to the Lithuanian president, Nausėda. They plan to use the base of the Lithuanian-Polish-Ukrainian brigade located in Poland for this training. So that's really good news there. Lithuania and Poland training Ukrainian soldiers. And we are... Yes. Then we're going to have a look at this. It's not that long a thread. So the government of Russia's Republic of Chechnya is reportedly forcibly sending detained homosexual men to fight in Ukraine, blackmailing them into volunteering for a military contract. At least 7 such cases are known, with 1 person killed so far. The Russian organisation crisis group is SKSOS, which supports persecuted LGBTQ people in the North Caucasus, reports that as early as September, Here you go, LGBTQ. Get my letters in a muddle there. The Chechen authorities began forcibly sending detained LGBTQ people to war in Ukraine. So this is, and actually interestingly, Georgia is tightening its laws as well and following Russia with regard to just general civic laws to do with sexuality. But this is Chechnya saying, well, we've clamped down on what we would see as sexual deviance, and we're just going to send you to war in Ukraine. 6 men are reported to have been detained in September 2022 on suspicion of being homosexual. According to SKSOS, they were threatened with a criminal case and would be fabricated against them, and they would be sent to a pre-trial detention centre to await sentencing, where information about their orientation would become known to their cellmates. Of course, then that's the end of you. The alternative was to pay the ransom or volunteer to go to war. In the end, 3 of the detainees were forced to agree to volunteer as a ransom was too much for their families. The security forces were asking 1.5 million rubles, $17,000. One of those who went to war died. The arrests continued the following year in 2023. Several members of the LGBTQ plus community were detained during one of the anti-homosexual raids. The girls were handed over to relatives that evening, and 4 boys were forced to go to Ukraine. The subsequent fate is unknown. The government of Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov is both homophobic and an enthusiastic supporter of the war in Ukraine. It has used aggressive tactics to enroll Chechens in the war, though its troops don't have a good reputation even on the Russian side. So that is happening. We've seen the new Lancet in use by the Russians. They have a new version of the Lancet that has a range of over 50 kilometers. It's called the Izdali 51. I reported on that ages ago. Anyway, it's definitely in use now, because here's a video of one being taken out by an FPV drone that takes it from above there. Soldiers of the 11th Brigade of National Guard shot down or used an FPV drone to take down the new modification of that Lancet drone. Good news there, although bad news, they've got a new, more capable drone. And then Jay in Kiev says, when you dismiss Russian disinformation as irrelevant or inconsequential, so this is pertaining to the whole DOJ indictment and people like Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and all these other people who then influence others like Donald Trump Jr., and then that gets into Congress, etc., etc. When you dismiss Russian disinformation as irrelevant or inconsequential, remember, thousands of Ukrainians died last year because Russian disinformation enveloped the US Republican Party to the point that they blocked Ukraine's funding for 6 months. A rug pull during the counteroffensive, and a tragedy that allowed Russians to make huge gains that are still ongoing. Russians spend billions a year on disinformation to warp naive American minds because it works. And German minds and French minds and British minds, etc., etc. This happens all across the world, but it has particular effect in the US, where we had 7 months of no military aid packages. And so it is really important that we talk about disinformation. It is really important that the DOJ comes down hard and heavy on those involved in these processes of spreading Russian narrative throughout the population in the US to affect the election and to affect electoral decisions, the democratic decisions within Congress. As we have seen, it's absolutely imperative that the US and all our nations get a handle on Russian disinformation and do something about it, because it translates into the death of people, as Jay and Kiev so rightfully here sets out. Anyway, thank you for watching. It was a massive one today for military aid. I don't know that I've got any more words left in me, and I really need a cup of tea. So take care, guys.